The Itchy and Scratchy Show.
Bang! Welcome to the Strat Fan Forum Football Show. We had a little technical glitch again. This time it wasn't a problem of not hitting the button, but we crashed, and I don't know what happened to the stuff that we had just recorded a few minutes ago, but it's kind of good that we lost it because Tom was about to make me cry about how good Andrew Luck was and how he's the new lord of the football realm. I was able to pull up the Football Outsiders website and check the DVOA of the Colts because my contention is the Colts are a good team. Tom still thinks they're way below average and that Luck is carrying them. But DVOA, they're 12th. The Broncos were second, and the Patriots are fourth based on regular season statistics. So we'll see what happens to them this weekend. I still think they're not a bad team, and that Andrew Luck is a great quarterback, no doubt about it. But it's not a one-man show, and that he does have talent around him. Tom, you can go ahead and destroy me now while I listen.
Well, we only have about an hour of broadcast time, and we have the entire defensive group of rookies for the upcoming spring drafts, primarily SSFA, one of NFL Ed's leagues for me, which is drafting this Saturday. But maybe we'll have to have a dedicated Andrew Luck show where we can talk with Andrew Luck, and I can read the last year's Total Outsiders Football Almanac, which says that the team is pretty much devoid of talent outside of him.
Well, that was last year, though, right? I mean, the same thing.
Yes,
you would read about Dallas Cowboys defense last year. It was awful, and now look what happened. I mean, they were able to use basically the same talent and have a much better season. So every year is its own little universe. Every year is its own little group of players that come together that are at different levels of health and motivation and talent. So yeah, they may have been awful 2 years ago, but this year I think it's a good team. It's a solid, above average, top 10 kind of team. So
I'm not familiar with any significant influx of talent in the Colts from last year's team. A couple of players,
sure. Last year with the Cowboys, they were dead last in defense, and suddenly they're middle of the pack. So
sure.
How did that happen without any influx of talent? Matter of fact, they lost to DeMarcus Ware. They had a couple other defections that affected them, you would think, but yeah, they performed better.
Well, they added the rookie offensive lineman, and DeMarco Murray is healthy. They were able to run the ball great. That helped the defense out, and the fact that they were then leading all the time, the defense did. But I think the Cowboys have more young players developing on defense. Rolando McClain came in and played all year, pretty much, which they didn't have last year.
Was he there last year?
I think he was hurt last year and was supposed to be coming back this year and then got hurt again. I could be wrong about that. I'm not a Cowboy fan. I do follow them so that I can give the Cowboy fans on the forum a hard time. But no, it's a fair point. Every year it's a different team. I'll be curious to see what happens. I'll keep that in the old memory bank for this July or August when the new Football Outsiders Almanac comes out, and we can see what they say about the 2014 Colts. I do think they do some things well. I like their corners specifically. I like Fleener as a receiving tight end. They pass blocked great in the game. We'll get bogged down on this, and we'll miss our opportunity to finish the draft, guys. I know Dennis is a working man, whereas I am a lazy bum.
You wanted to go over a couple of clarifications. One regarding Lane Johnson.
Oh yes, in last week's show or the other night, the show a few nights ago, I said that Derby Guy had projected Philadelphia Eagle offensive right tackle Lane Johnson as a 6, but he is not projected as a 6. He's projected as a 4-5. That's 4 run block, 5 pass block. I do say the run block first. Then I thought that perhaps Mark Lepage, Cowboys defense on the forum, had projected Lane as a 6, but no. He projects him as a 5-5, so obviously I was dreaming. I don't even own Lane Johnson, but
it's one of those things where he was around so many other 6s. I mean, there's 3 6s if you go out from the center out to the other side. So I could see everybody gets a 6 on the Eagles offensive line. Just give it to them.
Then we made some brief comments about how Luke Wilson had a good game after I was denigrating him last week. Then we looked at some yards after the catch stats from Pro Football Focus, and Luke Wilson did very well both last year and this year in those stats. Then we questioned the validity of those stats because people like Gronkowski and Julius Thomas weren't coming out necessarily that great in those stats. But then when we limited the snaps to only players who had played in at least half of their offensive stats, you had a better looking list of tight ends and weeded out the low catch guys who maybe had one big gain or something. But anyway, Russell. I'm calling you Russell. I'm going to call you Russell from now on. Dennis, that's right. Dennis has about an hour, so let's get into the defensive ratings. I sent you my file. If you recall last time, guys, we went around the horn at all the offensive positions for the rookies and players. I'm working off of a draft list that's available in NFL Ed's SSFA League, in which I play and Dennis plays, and we are drafting this Saturday morning. It's a 24-team continuous spring league. It's a spring equivalent of SOMIFA, which is a great fall league with tremendous coaches. And I have now sent Dennis my defensive spreadsheet, and I have put these guys actually more in order. So last time I just took like the top 7 running backs and just kind of threw them up there, not in any order. But now you have, my number 1 nose tackle is my number 1 nose tackle, for example.
Yes, so, you did a really nice job here. So let's jump right into the nose tackles. You have Damon Snacks Harrison as your top nose tackle, with Derby rating him as a 5. That's a second 5 on top of the 1 he got in 2013. So followed by Brandon Williams, who's a 0-1 in this set, but is projected to be a 5-1, and I'm sure he's at the top of the rankings in the Pro Football Focus's rankings and probably Football Outsiders as well. Then you have Benny Logan, who's a 0-2 in this set, but might get a 5 according to Derby. But again, we had some discussion there that if they give Michael Kendricks a 5 inside linebacker, that might bump him down to a 4. But that I don't think that would affect your rating of him. Talk about those top 3 guys: Damon Harrison, Brandon Williams, and Benny Logan.
Well, first, I'd like to commend you, Dennis, on giving Damon Snacks Harrison the correct nickname. I have seen guys post on the forum calling him Big Snacks, and that gets me angry because I'm a Jet fan, and it's a great story that we have Damon Snacks Harrison, who was a UFA in 2012. Supposedly, he needed to lose a lot of weight in 2013, maybe, training camp, and they asked him, and like his teammates asked him how he was going to do it, and he just kept harping upon how he had to cut out those snacks. Got to cut out those snacks. They started calling him Snacks. Damon Snacks Harrison. You would think that a heavy nose tackle, he's called Snacks because he likes to eat those snacks, but he was cutting them out to get down from whatever monstrous weight he was at towards NFL nose tackle size. Damon is pretty much a great run-stopping nose tackle. He comes out great in the rankings both last year and this year. The Jet run defense was great again. You can't really have a great 3-4 run defense without good play from the nose tackle. I've read last year, I know, and somewhat this year, that he makes a lot more tackles. He had 55 tackles this year. That he makes a lot more tackles than your typical 3-4 nose tackle. The main job, supposedly, I'm not a great X's and O's guy, but the main job is basically that the nose tackle is supposed to occupy multiple blockers, free up the linebackers to make tackles. But the Damon makes a lot of tackles on his own, which is a pretty good thing because he's always right around the line of scrimmage. He's not 10 yards downfield making a tackle. Not a pass rusher, his classic 3-4 nose tackle. My concern with him, though, Rex Ryan getting fired. The new coach comes in. Are the Jets going to play a 3-4? Are the Jets going to play a 4-3? If Snacks moves over to a 4-3 defensive tackle spot and he's a 5-0 or a 5-1 or a 5-2, there's a lot of guys like that running around in Strat, and he becomes much less valuable than a true nose tackle 5. If it's a 3-4 defense and the Jets play real good defense overall, there's a possibility that he could get a 6, although I would have a hard time seeing a 6-6-6 stock team defensive line, and the Jets have a lot of pedigree with Muhammad Wilkerson and Sheldon Richardson at defensive end. So there's some concerns about Damon, but you got at least 2 nose tackle 5s, and even if they go to a 4-3, the guy's proven he's a good run stopper. Brandon Williams was a guy I liked a lot in the Somifa draft. A guy I knew nothing about. I read good things about him a little bit as a rookie, but he didn't play much, I don't believe, as a rookie in 2013. I just heard a ding noise. Are we still good?
Yeah, I just brought up the effects so I can give you a round of applause.
Oh, I can't now. Yeah, as we're recording this, it's 1:27 a.m. on the East Coast, so I need all kinds of ego stroking to help me continue. But oh my God.
Real quick, I wanted to say, I actually ask you about, um, do you take a look at your current roster and decide whether or not to take a nose tackle over a defensive tackle based on who you have at those positions currently?
Well, and that depends on whether I've got a team that's in what. It depends upon what phase of competition my team is in. I a few years ago decided after doing dreadfully in numerous drafts and so me for chasing a franchise quarterback, I decided I would pursue the best player available, and pretty much regardless of position. I mean, with to a degree. Um, but I prefer to play a 3-4 if I can. I don't think there's that many inside linebackers that are well rated running around in Strat anymore. I feel like 5-6 years ago there was just a ton of middle linebacker fives running around, and it was pretty easy to put together two fives as your 3-4 inside linebackers. Maybe Strat realized that they were just knee jerk giving all these guys fives, and now it seems like there's very few of them. So I think
I
it's
call that the low foot to Tupu era.
yes, exactly.
Everybody was getting a 5.
Yeah, and, except for Will Witherspoon.
Yes.
Yes. And also, I don't feel like there's a lot of true nose tackles around. I think Derby only has a few teams even rated for the 3-4. Well, no, he certainly only has a few nose tackle fives or better rated in his projections. I mean, you have guys who are 4-3-6s, and you can play at a 3-4 nose tackle. Of course, he's got New England plays a 4-3 now. Vince Wilfork used to be one of the regular nose tackle sixes. Haloti Nagata doesn't always get nose tackle six anymore. So things like that happen.
Okay, let me
But
give you
yeah,
a hypothetical. Let me give you a hypothetical. It's Saturday morning.
all right.
Your team currently has Paul Salai as a 5'2" defensive tackle.
I'm not playing.
You're sitting around 18th pick in the first round.
Okay.
Both Snacks, Harrison are available, as well as let's say, goodness gracious, who's a good 4-3? How about
Well,
Jonathan
what?
Hankins? Jonathan Hankins. No, it's too early. Sharif Floyd. Sharif Floyd's available, and so it's Snacks. And you're up at pick 18. You've traded for it. Who are you
All right.
taking?
On my team, on my SSFA team, well, you got to realize even though I only have Paul Soliai, I'm playing a 3-4 with that team. Look at my linebackers.
I know a 6 and a 5 on the inside. So
Yeah,
you
I would take Snacks over Floyd. I have some questions about Floyd. So for that team, I would take Snacks over Floyd, but I think it definitely depends on your team. That team is a 3-4 team. That team I'm expecting to compete this year and next year. I'm getting two nose tackle 5 ratings out of Snacks. If he goes to a 4-3 after that, well, look, I got Peyton Manning. I'm not going to be around forever anyway, so that's not as much of a concern for me. Now, the real question I think would be if I had a rebuilding team. Let's say I had a team that only had a few good young players, but I had a whole lot of picks. I think, then I might take Brandon Williams over Snacks because Baltimore's been playing a 3-4 forever. It seems like. And I'm more confident that Brandon Williams is going to continue as a good, highly rated nose tackle for many years. The question I think would be whether I took Brandon Williams over someone like Sharif Floyd and committed long term to a 3-4 vis-a-vis a 4-3. I like a number of the 4-3 defensive tackles in this draft, at least the first 4. So that really depends. By the time you're drafting, you should be knowing. Look, if your team is competitive and you're trying to make the playoffs, you better know before the draft starts if you're playing a 3-4 or a 4-3. I guess in some unusual situations, you can have the flexibility. Maybe if all your guys are a 4 and it doesn't really matter. It depends if you're trying to compete. Take the guys that fit your defense. But again,
it's more about.
go ahead. Don't tell me I lost you again.
5,
You're breaking up.
nose tackle.
You're breaking up badly, Dennis.
Let me take over for a little bit while Tom catches up here on the lag. But
Go.
like Tom was saying, you're looking at your team.
Dennis, I'm not hearing you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there. I think I'm okay.
You're okay now.
Better. You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let's move forward then. We touched on the nose tackles a little bit. Is there anybody else further down the list outside of those top 3 that you might take a flyer on later on?
Well, even though Benny Logan is listed number 3, he concerns me long term. He's supposed to be a little smaller for an NFL nose tackle. That concerns me. When Josh Chapman started in a 3-4 defense, and the Colts are an up and coming team, so he has a possibility to get some good ratings. I wouldn't take him too high, but maybe in the 4th round. John Jenkins, I love as a long-term sleeper. I know you drafted him in Somifa. He's a guy that I think can really come on with some strong ratings in a couple of years. But you never know. Is John Jenkins going to come through and be a perennial 5 in a couple of years, or is he going to just totally fail and fade away? But he's a guy that I like. Quentin Dial filled in for injury, so I don't know. He's questionable.
And they're going to have a lot of changes there on with their coaching staff, so who knows?
Exactly. Josh Boyd on Green Bay got some playing time. B.J. Raji has kind of disappeared. He could be like a late pick that ends up – a lot of times these nose tackles are like late picks that haven't done much in their first or second year. Then a couple of years down the line, they really come through. So Josh Boyd, John Jenkins would be later round guys or mid-round guys that if you want to play a 3-4 might be good to keep an eye on.
Good deal. Okay, let's go to the straight defensive tackles, the 4-3 guys. You have Star Latulele, easy for me to say?
Latulele.
Latulele. Sharif Floyd, Jonathan Hankins, Quan Short, and then it kind of drops off after that. So let's talk about those top 4 guys.
Sure. It's interesting. Even though Sharif Floyd is listed 2nd, everything I've read about him coming into the 2013 NFL draft talked about what great talent he had, but there were maybe some issues in terms of being a guy who played hard every down and things like that, and what his attitude was like. Now, we all should pay attention to new coaches coming in and to coaches leaving, like you said, is happening in San Francisco. So since former Cincinnati defensive coordinator Mike Zimmer came in to become Minnesota's head coach this year, and Sharif Floyd had a very fine season. He had 4.5 sacks. He became a regular starter. He became a guy that you heard was a real solid player for them. And he's supposed to be a little explosive, and he's a 4-3 tackle. Star Latulele, a little more of a straight run stopper. You heard great things about him as a rookie. You thought he was going to be a perennial 6. You didn't hear as much about him this year, but the Panthers defense played great in the second half of the season and into the postseason. So if you were going straight future, I could see someone saying, I'm going to take Sharif Floyd over Star Latulele. I don't think you're going to have that problem because Latulele is a rated 5 right now as a rookie, so someone will take him and Floyd will be on the board later. But future-wise, I think I probably like Floyd a little more than Latulele, although Latulele is a very safe pick. So actually, because of the safety factor, I'd probably take Latulele first, but I never expect him to really get good pass rush. Floyd.
Yeah, I think you can see those guys going. Floyd and Jonathan Hankins both have come on strong this year. I could see them going late 1st, early 2nd, based on their seasons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are guys. Let's say somewhere in that 18 to 31 range, depending on the size of your league. You could expect to see those guys go. But there are also guys who, because they do absolutely nothing as a rookie, and because they're only 4-3 defensive tackles and no one's projecting a 6 for them and they didn't make the Pro Bowl, they're guys that could slip even further. I wouldn't be astonished if you're getting these guys at 40, 45 in a spring draft because they give nothing for the year and they're 4-3 defensive tackles. I liked Quan Short a lot. I read a lot of good things about him as a rookie. He came through with a solid year. So if you want 4-3 tackles, I mean, there's 4 good guys there. The enigmatic guy comes in at number 5, Sylvester Williams for the Broncos was an NFL first-round pick. Was starting alongside Terrence Knighton. Supposedly, they were going to do great against the run this year, and he was going to be a part of it. And they did do great against the run this year, but he charted out dreadfully on Pro Football Focus, and I did not hear anything good written about him anywhere. Derby has projected him as a 0, but these young defensive linemen sometimes take a couple of years to get going. So he's not a guy that I would say is a definite bust. Look, whenever you have a guy who was a first-round NFL pick and he's starting for his NFL team and his NFL team has a stable front office situation, that's a good thing. Now they just had a coaching change. Is someone going to come in there and play a 3-4 and put Terrence Knight at nose tackle? That could happen. Then you're stuck with Sylvester Williams as I don't know what. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he'll be like a junior Red Bryant type that may be lucky to get a 4-1 for a couple years as a defensive end in a 3-4.
Yeah, so you got to look for a red flag whenever you have a player, especially defensive tackle, and new coaches coming in. That could mean they're switching to a 3-4, or vice versa, or maybe the new coach doesn't like this player as much. Coaches like different things in players. So Williams is a guy that I wouldn't say totally avoid him, but don't draft him too highly. Probably, if you're smart, there'll be a safer pick than where you'd find him. I would feel you take him around pick 100 or so and cross your fingers. But even then, if there's someone safe at a different position who looks pretty good, I might say, you know what, let someone else gamble on the first-round talent. Maybe they hit the jackpot, maybe they don't. Chris Jones has gotten plenty for the Patriots. Nick Hayden, will probably be a 4 because of Henry Melton, but he's not too highly regarded. But, they're guys, middle rounds, whatever, that you grab one of them for some depth and maybe they, improve. That happens all the time, right?
Right, and he's an older player, so you don't want to invest too high of a pick in him when he can easily disappear. Very replaceable when you get those 4-0 defensive tackles
sure.
on the D-line. So.
Yeah, talking about Hayden, of course, not Jones.
Right, Nick Hayden.
Yeah, and Jones was only a 6th-round pick, and Wilfork's going to get a great rating, so there's not a lot of opportunity for Jones to probably get great ratings either. But he's on the Patriots, so you never know.
Yeah. He played well, and he's somebody who you want to keep an eye on. 6th-round pick that got a lot of playing time this year in his second season. So.
Sure, but still more of a mid-round guy than certainly not a top 3 rounds guy, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. But you grab that guy in the 6th or 7th round, and you get a couple 4s, maybe a 5 out of him somewhere down the line. That's good enough. You're not looking for much more than that at that point.
Sure. All right, moving over to defensive end. This group was very interesting to me back in the fall as we prepared for the SOMIFA draft. Now, a lot of these guys did not do as well in year 2, and the order has changed. I think my first 2 guys will be the same as everyone else's. Number 1, I've got Ezekiel Ansah, of course, from the Detroit Lions. Number 5 pick in the 2013 NFL Draft. He was a 4-rate as a rookie. He had a very good year this year by all accounts. Derby has him projected as a 6'8". The guy came to NFL football late. He's of Nigerian descent, and supposedly he's playing really, really well, a great athlete. And had 7.5 sacks. You'd like to see him grab a few more. Didn't have any of the last few games of the season, but nowadays it's sometimes hard to get sacks when you can't even breathe on the quarterback. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that he's going to be a perennial 6. He's going to be your next Jason Pierre-Paul. I think he has great talent. He didn't have a lot of wear and tear on him because of that late start, and the guy's just a beast. So you take him in the top 10 of your drafts, and you're happy you have him.
And like a lot, and a very supposedly very hard-working guy, was I think a pretty good student at BYU. So all the intangibles, maybe a quiet guy, but in terms of the effort and any off-the-field problems, I don't think they're going to surface with Ziggy Ansah. He should be a top 5 pick in every spring draft easily. Number 2 is a New York Jet. Of course, I'm a big Jets fan. I think I do a pretty good job avoiding homerism when I'm ranking these players. However, Sheldon Richardson was the 13th pick in the draft, was the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year last year, is a 5'3" on the current card. Derby's projecting him as a 6'8". My only question about Sheldon coming into the 2014 NFL season was whether or not he was going to get pass rush, because he was looking like a straight 3-4 defensive end. but he rushed the passer pretty well this year, and he got 8 sacks, and he was tremendous against the run. Even when Muhammad Wilkerson went out the last few games, he was still tremendous against the run. Only question you have right now, new coaching staff coming in for the Jets, are they going to play a 3-4? Are they going to play a 4-3? If you need a defensive end, Sheldon was advertised as a defensive tackle. He still gets referred to as a defensive tackle a lot, even though he never plays nose tackle for the Jets, but they do go to 4-man fronts at times. Sheldon could be a future 4-3 defensive tackle, and you
I
have
don't
to
think
decide.
I don't really think that affects his value that much. He's still going to get after the passer. He's still going to get a high rating. I mean, if you had him next year and he plays in a 4-3 and winds up with a 5-7 or a 6-7 as a defensive tackle, that's great. That's a very valuable position.
But if you like to play a 3-4, or if you really need a defensive end, now you've got to make a trade, and maybe you can't always find the right trade partner. So I mean, it's up to. I mean, ideally, you got a young team that could use him at either position, and you can take him and not worry too much about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're outside those top two. There's a big drop off when you.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's, if you have a chance to get one of them, don't worry about the coaching changes. Don't worry about the position change. Just grab the talent and worry about that. Let it figure it out later.
And really, we already spoke about the nose tackles and the defensive tackles. These two guys are head and shoulders the best two defensive linemen in the draft. I mean, is there a nose tackle or a 4-3 tackle that you want over Sheldon Richardson? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. And even if you get star Latulaloy, I'm gonna look that up afterward and practice my phonetics. But I still think you want Sheldon Richardson over him.
Yeah,
I think 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that we talk about is whenever you find a guy who you just know. I mean, you just know this guy is a very solid, quality player. There's really no question about his football ability. And with Sheldon, I haven't heard of any off-the-field problems, of course. Then you grab that guy almost no matter what position he plays, because it is such a safe pick, especially if you're in a larger league. I mean, if you're in a smaller league, listen, there's superstars all over the place. You do what you want. But if you're in a larger league, 24 teams or 30 teams or what have you, I mean, Sheldon Richardson, he's going to play for your team for 8, 9, 10 years at a very high level. So if he's not, so I mean, if you're in a rare situation where you've got already, 4 great defensive linemen and none of them are particularly old, then I guess you pass on Sheldon. But if you could use him at either end or tackle specifically, and you have a high pick and you're thinking long term, that's an excellent pick.
Agreed. And I am kicking myself in Somifa. I wound up taking Kenny Vaccaro with the 12th pick, I think, and I had a chance to take Sheldon Richardson, who slipped further than you'd think he would have. And that was a need pick. Don't go for the need, people. Pick that talent.
Well, what's interesting, and we talked about this regarding this entire draft class on both sides of the ball the other night, is there are so many players, especially in the fall. There were so many players that could have gone 5, 6, 7, or number 20, and Sheldon Richardson was like that. In Somifa, he went like number 18, I think, or 17 or 18, and he could have gone number 5. And I do the mock drafts over there, and I remarked that he was one of the guys in the mix for the guy who was picking number 5. He had 3 or 4 guys in the mix, but that if he didn't take him, he would probably fall to 17 or 18 because the other teams didn't have that need. You do want to take the best player available, but guys, they try to match need. Look, Kenny Vaccaro had a very good rookie season. It was supposed to be good, so I would not have told you made a bad move at that point. Right now, obviously, Richardson looks like a far better player, but at that point, Vaccaro also looked like a very good player, so it's tough.
Yeah, you're debating between the 5 or 6 on the D line and the 5 or 6 in the secondary, but you never know. I still say I should have taken Richardson. I was so close to typing his name in, but I was too much of the Vaccaro hype spewed by Nathan Baylor. Nathan, I'm blaming you. Pushed me that way.
Always good to blame people who cannot respond. I find that's a good tactic.
He's going to join us. Nathan's going to get on one of these football shows and be able to speak for himself.
Yeah, Nathan's a great guy, an excellent GM, and a great Strat guy all around. Now, moving down, my next guy, a little bit of a sleeper, This guy was okay. I talk about the Football Outsiders Almanac, which is a publication that they put out every summer, and they do extensive commentary and DVOAs, and they look at all the rookies and young players, and it's a good place to start thinking about things. They don't always have all the answers, but you start thinking about things in a little more of a sophisticated way. And they're always working on developing stats that can project how these college guys are going to do in the NFL. They've had some success with it. They've had some hits and misses with it. Overall, I would say I'm not that thrilled with their projection, but one that has worked out pretty well is their sack seer projection. That's sack and then SEER, all capital letters. Their sack seer projections, where they project like how many sacks a front seven guy is going to get in like the first 5 years of his NFL career, and their success rate has been pretty good in terms of, I think at least 70% of the guys that they say are going to be good actually end up being pretty good. Demontre Moore, the defensive end for the Giants, was the third-round pick in last year's NFL draft, had a very good sacks year projection rating, and then despite not starting a single game this year, had 5.5 sacks. So he's, I don't have a Derby rating here for him, but he's going to have to be at least like a 0.6 or 0.7 as a backup. But a guy like that, I would expect to eventually, and probably sooner rather than later, work his way into the starting lineup. If you're going total future, this is a guy you'd love to get around pick number 80 or so. Good pass rushing is hard to find. I find it's really hard to find a good defensive end who can pass rush and especially get you at least a 5. It's just they're just not out there. And then when you want to trade for them, they cost a fortune.
Yeah, and he's a guy that's going to grow into his role. He has a nothing card this year, and he'll be a 0.8 next year, or 0.7 or something like that. But he's going to be one of those guys that gets you a 4.10 or 5.11. It's just going to take a couple years for him to establish himself as a starter. But when he does, watch out. Look at all those sacks he got as a part-time player. That's fantastic.
And he also had 32.
When you watch the Giants highlights, you see him showing up.
And he also had 32 tackles. So you're not talking about a guy that was used solely as pass rushing only. He got some regular reps against regular offenses in regular situations. And, I'm not going to say he's definitely going to be a 5'12 or anything. You never know. But he's a good-looking guy, and he's got, projections that have been pretty good that are a lot more reliable than other projections. So he's an interesting guy. I really wanted him in the fall league. I think Renee took him before I could get him. Someone took him, and I was angry.
I was able to grab him only in pros and contra, but I'm happy I have him. At least in one league.
Now, then we move down. The next guy is very interesting, Akeem Hicks, because last year everyone loved Akeem Hicks. He had good sacks year projections, I believe. He had a good rookie year with the Saints, was a starting defensive end 4.6. But then this year, Saints defense falls apart. In Strato, Derby has them playing a 4.3, and Hicks is a defensive tackle 4.2. He only had 2 sacks. But, and what's interesting is they apparently are going to retain Rob Ryan, which is kind of shocking. Everyone thought he was definitely going to be fired, but as of right now, they're talking about keeping him, and I think they announced they will keep him. So I don't know what to do with Hicks. I feel like he still has talent. I feel like someone who needs a decent defensive end for the year, even though he's only a 4.6, will probably take him higher than a lot of guys would like. I keep harping on this number like 100, somewhere around pick 100, he'd be a real good pick. I do think
everybody's going to go at 100.
Exactly. That's all we're going to have. And but I think someone will probably take him a lot earlier than that. I bet you he goes about around pick 70 in a lot of drafts.
He's going to be one of those underrated, overrated players. He's going to go higher solely because of his rating, but whoever takes him is going to be pleasantly surprised in a couple of years, I think, when the talent and maybe a position switch back to the outside increases his value again.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. He's a guy that could suddenly really blossom in a couple of years. The rest of the defensive ends, I took, let's see.
How about Ryan Davis? Talk a little bit about him. He's one of the guys that played awesome in the preseason and was used as a situational pass rusher. Is he having any chance to establish himself as a starter? I know Jacksonville has those 2 Seattle defensive ends, but what do you see for him?
Well, it's interesting. There were a couple of guys. Alex Okafor is another one. that didn't really have any sort of great publicity going into the 2013 NFL season. And I had a decent feeling about Okafor particularly, and they were sliding, but I was picking other guys other places, and then I was kicking myself a year later when the guys got a good rating. Look, I mean, the guy right now is being used as a pass rushing specialist. He had 6.5 sacks, 19 total tackles, didn't start at all. If Gus Bradley is supposedly trying to build a defense similar to the Seattle system, obviously the personnel isn't there yet. Then they're going to probably try to rotate in a lot of defensive linemen and defensive ends. The Chris Clemens and Red Bryant that they signed from Seattle are older. So I don't know what to make of Ryan Davis. I mean, I feel like don't draft him too highly.
He's definitely like this 8th round, 9th round kind of guy. You probably won't get him that late, but because somebody will look at that pass rush number and grab him maybe in the 5th or 6th or 7th. But I would take him in the 8th or 9th. I think he's one of those guys that, I mean, he only played, it's such a limited time, 98 snaps, and he grabbed 6.5 sacks. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah,
now, he's going to be a double-digit sack guy ever, but those 0-8 guys are useful on third downs.
Yeah, I think I'd probably take him a little higher than 8th round. I think, depending on the size of your league, I think maybe around pick 120, maybe a little behind all those 100 guys. You're talking about a guy could be a mid to late 5th round pick in Somifa if you have a young team and there aren't any quality young starters around. I'm not the big a fan of the depth in this draft for a rebuilding team. But,
the thing with Davis that will make him slip is the 0-2 card currently. If he had a 0-7 right now, yeah, he's definitely going to go 120 or 100. But with a 0-2 card and being in Jacksonville without the pub, well, he's getting pub now on this podcast or videocast. I still think he's going to go in the 8th, 7th or 8th.
And I believe, Dennis, that when you're quoting rounds, you're talking about a 24-team league?
Yeah, so he just rounded up to 25. So you're talking like pick 175, something like that, 180, 180, 190, somewhere around there.
Yeah, no, I'm probably going to hang myself if I mention Deion Jordan at all. So should I hang myself?
Do it. He's going to go pretty high. I mean, there's people who'd love to take first rounders, and he went 3rd overall in the NFL. So you're not the only one. Let's talk about him.
I'll hang myself. Well, this is how I'm hanging myself. I absolutely hate this guy. I'm not sure I'd want him on my team at all. All right, maybe that's a slight exaggeration, but I literally don't think I would take him in the top 150. Okay.
He'll go in the top 100.
Oh, he'll go. He'll definitely go I think he'll go in the top 90. I think he'll go. I think he'll go between 55 and 95.
Because people, some of the coaches, and this works out a lot of time, but they'll rank people based on where they went in the draft. So they'll have the first rounders and the second rounders and the third rounders, and when he's still up there on that draft, on that big board, when pick 60 goes by, pick 80 goes by, somebody's going to grab him.
This is what I don't like about him, and I think coaches who do that are doing themselves a disservice, especially when you've had 2 years of information now on a player, because we're talking about going into the spring and not in the fall. But you have a guy drafted 3rd overall for pass rushing ability. He's supposed to be a great athlete, okay? Does absolutely nothing as a rookie, okay? Nothing, okay? Then bulks up in the offseason. They say, oh, great, he's added all the size and the strength. Oh, yeah, and then he gets busted for PEDs, so that's how he bulked up. And then he comes back from the suspension, which was only like 4 games, and does nothing. Or maybe 6 games, because he might have had a marijuana suspension on top of that, and does absolutely nothing again. The guy had 1 sack, in 10 games. He did have 20 tackles, so I am not a fan of this guy at all. This is how I'm hanging myself, because, next year he's going to get 14 sacks and be a 6-12-3 or something. But I'm not a fan of this guy, and I would urge people to stay away from him, overlook his NFL draft status until maybe like about pick 115 or so, 110.
Okay.
So I mean, in Somifa, there's only 24 teams. You want to take him in the middle of the 4th round, late 4th round, I wouldn't have too much of a complaint. And again, because I'm not that thrilled to death, but I believe he'll be a bust.
But think twice about taking him even then if you have a bigger need or a pressing need or another player that might have as equal an upside, because right now his upside is trending down.
Yeah, but no one's going to think that. No one. Well, I mean, from a talent standpoint, no one's going to think another player has a similar upside because of where Gian Jordan was drafted. But I guarantee you that at probably that point in the fourth round, you can find an offensive lineman with no rating who's starting. That's probably going to be a better pick for you.
I think I'd rather take Margaret's Hunt, who also did nothing, but at least he's working hard and trying. So.
Oh, he's the ultimate. Not he to me. I shouldn't say the ultimate. He to me is a hard knocks guy that gets bumped up because of hard knocks, and that you should stay away from primarily because of his age. Margus Hunt turns 28 this July.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good catch.
He turns 28 this July, and look, the guy was a second round pick. He's played 2 NFL seasons. He's done nothing. He had 7 tackles this year and 1 sack. Now, maybe he's a late bloomer. I have a lot of faith in Cincinnati's ability to coach up defensive players, but let him slip. And maybe you take him, in that 115 group. After the 100 guys. But I'm not a big believer just because of the age. There are a couple of guys who are interesting to me. Devin Taylor on Detroit was a 4th-round pick, was a backup, had 15 tackles. They might be losing Ndamukong Suh. Maybe Jason Jones slides into tackle. He used to play tackle for Tennessee. Maybe Taylor gets some more reps, especially if Terrell Austin is still going to stay there as a DC. He showed himself to be a great DC this year. William Golston on Tampa Bay got some run. Had 9 starts, 41 tackles, was a 4th-round pick. You got a good defensive coach there. So those are guys that you're not going to take real high, and maybe they're guys you take in the in 125 and later. But they're guys that may end up doing the job for you, and it's hard to find defensive ends. So there's, I know Nathan was big on Monty Bryant. He's down there. Keith Spence got some run for the Buccaneers, but that might have been. He's listed as a defensive tackle on the card, but he played end for them in the NFL. He had 39 tackles and 5 starts. So there's some guys that you could take in 6th, 7th round, and maybe you luck out and get somebody decent.
Good deal. Perfectly covered on the defensive end front. Let's move on to the inside linebackers.
Sure.
And talk about Mr. Kiko Alonso, injured. No card for the upcoming season, but he has a 5.5, and he's at the top of your board.
Yeah, well, let me say first of all that this is a bad group. Inside, there's not a lot of talent at inside linebacker, in my opinion, in this draft. Now, Alonso's wanted the board because of the rating 5.5, and also because there's no one else out there whose future I love and that I'm really big on. And Alonso was a talent. He's shown he can play in the NFL. Maybe he has a real good year this year. We know Rex Ryan is now coaching the Buffalo Bills. I don't know what he's thinking. He pretty much is moving to the same exact type of team he just left. But that's something I just thought of, is that you got this Bills defense that was great last year, and now you're going to add Kiko Alonso to it. That's pretty. That could be pretty exciting if you like, 13 to 10 football games, which I do. But yeah, I mean, Alonso, I would say, exercise extreme caution. I'm not a fan of guys that get injured in their first 2 years. They could come back and do great, but I would rather take a healthy guy, let someone else take Alonso. If you need the rating badly, you got a championship caliber team, but for some reason your middle linebacker is a 0 and you want to take Alonso number 20 overall, I guess I could see that. But long term, I would be concerned. I probably would feel more comfortable with him, like at least maybe number 37 on, so still a mid-second round pick in Somifa, maybe a high second round pick.
He won't last that long. Like you said, the inside linebacker is not like it was 5 years ago. There's going to be somebody who grabs him in the late first, early second round, and hopes that he comes back and plays strong. Now, and that's just because of the lack of available talent at inside linebacker. It's as simple as that. The next 2 guys are interesting. Manti Te'o and Paul Warlow. Now you have Te'o has a 4.0 this year and a 4.3 projected next year, whereas Warlow has a 0.5 with a 4.4 projected for next year, according to Derby. But Warlow had 143 tackles. Is there any way that he gets a 5 next year?
Well, sure. There's a possibility he gets a 5 next year. I mean, I'm not the Strat guy doing the ratings, nor have I researched Paul Warlow enough to determine whether or not he deserves a 5. I do feel like tackles is probably the most overrated statistic in professional football.
Really?
Absolutely, because
Okay.
I mean, I have found examples of teams where, like this, where there was, a couple years ago there was a safety that was like number 8 or 9 in the entire NFL in tackles,
Yes.
and he was on a terrible defense, and it was
Right.
nobody in the front seven was making tackles. So this guy's got to make all the tackles. I mean, he's a great player. I don't know. I've wondered about this. I haven't seen it in proof, but if you're on a bad defense, isn't the other team going to run more plays against you? So shouldn't you then be able to make more tackles than a guy in a good defense? I mean, if you're on a defense that's always making the other team go 3 and out, you should have fewer tackle opportunities. I would imagine. I'm speculating on that. I don't know
I will grant you that, but a few years ago there was a rookie safety that led the Seahawks in tackles, and became a Pro Bowl player. His name is Cam Chancellor. So sometimes those tackle statistics aren't as misleading, but you're right. A lot of tackles means that the other team's getting a lot of plays.
Well, now it doesn't. Now, if you look at the tackle leaders list, there are often some very good players up there, so it doesn't always mean that. But like for example, I just brought up this year's tackle list. Okay, number 1, Luke Kuechly, great player, right? Number 2, DeAndre Levy, excellent player, right? Number 3, Levante David, excellent player. Who's number 4? Don't look.
Is it
And
Paul
NFC, it's an NFC inside linebacker. It's not Warlow.
Okay, let me think. Is it somebody on the Bears?
No.
Okay. Give me a clue. Give me a division.
NFC. Well, now you're gonna get it because we already said it's not Warlow and it's not Levante David, but and NFC South.
Oh, okay. So that's no Falcons, no Bucks, no. So it's got to be no Panthers.
Actually, yeah. So there's only one team left, but you might not recognize him as being on this team. It's Curtis Lofton.
Oh, Saints inside linebacker, right?
Yeah. Now Curtis Lofton's 4th, and Paul Warlow is 5th, and they were on 2 of the worst defenses in the entire NFL.
Gotcha.
Number 9
so
is.
Sometimes it means something, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I think this year the good players are matched up with the tackles more so than in other seasons.
But you'll probably have guys up. You'll probably have like John Jenkins up there as well as in the tackle.
If I go to last year, who was number 2? AFC South middle linebacker. Number 2, and this is not his first NFL team.
Paul Posluszny?
Yes, Paul Posluszny on the Jacksonville Jaguars last year. Last year's 2013 Jacksonville Jaguars was number 2 in the NFL in tackles.
He's a good player, and he's a perennial 5 in Strat.
Yeah, he's a pretty good player, but he's not all pro. And one of the reasons he had so many tackles is because the defense is so terrible. They had plenty of tackle opportunities. DeQuell Jackson on Cleveland was number 7. That wasn't a great defense. You know who's number 8 in the NFL in tackles last year? You'll never guess this in a million years. It's a safety from the NFC. Barry Church. Barry Church was number 8 in the NFL in tackles in 2013.
And Dallas had the absolute worst defense in the NFL last year.
So it looks like you had about 60% of the guys real good, and then the other guys, it looks like they're more a product of the team. So I'm not a big fan of that. Now, when I've made my comments, go ahead.
I was going to say, one guy that you have in here, you have him listed with the outside linebackers, but I think you should shift him over to Tahir Whitehead. I think he's the next middle linebacker that you'd want to take in Strat.
Yeah, I think that I didn't slide him over yet, right?
Yeah, so I'm
usually pretty good about that. I do have him listed as an MLB 4-0, but I did leave him the outside linebackers. Like I said, these lists are pretty good that I gave you tonight, but there's still some tinkering that needs to be done on them.
Right, and sometimes you don't want to move the guy like Jamie Collins. You have as your top outside linebacker, even though he'll be a middle linebacker next year. I don't know if you want to move him to middle linebacker or if you want to, leave him listed at outside linebacker.
As long as you make yourself a comment, then you should be good to go. But yeah, I think Tahir Whitehead would be the 4th middle linebacker here. I'm not convinced he's going to hold down the starting middle linebacker job next year if Stephen Tulloch is healthy and restrains himself in future celebrations. But that third linebacker spot is also up for grabs, and Whitehead has certainly done enough to make you think that he could start for Detroit next year, and you just don't know which spot yet.
Right. If they shift him outside and he's a 4 or 5 out there, that's great. If he continues to play well.
In some ways, you could almost say, that I like him better than Teo or Warlow in terms of he's going to a good defense. I should say he's on a good defense, and I don't know. That's a tough call, but he's certainly not a bad player to take it all. Definitely keep your eye on. I think the outside linebacker group isn't that bad. It's actually pretty good. Not superstars. The outside linebacker group in next year's draft, or I should say just the linebacker group in general, you got C.J. Mosley, you got Khalil Mack, you got Anthony Barr. I mean, that might be. Those three guys might go top 11 in almost every full draft. Yeah. Now you look at let's hop over to outside linebacker for a minute. Some of these guys can go pretty highly, but I think next year's group is better. I mean, Jamie Collins is establishing himself now as a superstar. He's going to be interesting to see where he goes. He's only a 4 on the card. Derby's projecting a middle linebacker 6'6" for him. If you've been watching the playoffs, he's a really good-looking player.
I think some announcer said he was the best player in football. Chris Collinsworth.
Yeah.
Said he was the best player in football. I think a little bit of hyperbole there, but he'll go in the first round. He'll definitely go in the first round of the SSFA draft.
Yeah, I think he'll probably go top 12.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
I got to adjust my mock draft because we just assigned 3 new teams to 3 new coaches, so I've got to come with a new mock, which I plan on doing before this weekend. Maybe I'll do it after this podcast if I can't sleep. So let's go back to middle linebacker 1 second. Manti Te'o, Paul Warlow. I mean, these are flawed guys. I'm not sure you can anticipate higher than a 4 for these guys, so don't overdraft them. Even though they're if you need an inside linebacker, I don't think you could take either of these guys and feel like, good, I have my inside linebacker for the next 5, 6, 7 years. You may just have to wait until next year, or take a guy later, like to hear Whitehead, like you said, or if you're fortunate to have a high pick and take Jamie Collins. That's where you're going to be. I think the current way that Strat does the ratings, and I'm not basing this on any science or mathematical analysis, but based upon the NFL and the current way that Strat is giving out ratings, I think it's easier to field a good 4-3 than it is a good 3-4. But having said that, the flat pass is so strong that 3-4 is just strategically is just such an advantage over the 4-3. I feel like.
I do too. Although I've played recently with some 4-3 teams in draft leagues and have had success. I even won Spring Fever last year. I think my team was a 4-3 base.
Yeah,
so it can be done.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of an. If you're used to playing the 3-4 and all that flexibility, it's definitely a bit of an acquired taste going to that 4-3. But what you find is, you can, especially if you have good defenders in the front 4, you stop the run a lot more easily. The yardage on the card is, I think, 1 yard less per carry than it is on a 3-4 with no men.
It's harder to stop guys at the goal line. The 3-4 is just way overpowered for that.
Absolutely.
But the 4-3, you get that cheese roll on 10 where it's like 1 or -1. So whether you guessed right or wrong. So there are some advantages, but
yeah. It's interesting. I think you need better personnel. I think the worse your personnel is, the more likely you say I got to play a 3-4. I played a 4-3 with my Jet team, the shitty Jet team with Andrew Luck that just made the playoffs. But I'm 4-4-4-0 on the line, and I'm 0-4-5 at linebacker. But I gave up a lot of points, and every time I played a good team, I got smacked around. I gave up like 35 points to every good team, 35 or more.
What, 11-5 or 10-6, something like that?
10-6.
That's pretty good, man. Pretty damn good with that team.
Yeah, but I keep patting myself on the back of that. People are getting tired of it, so they're ready to.
We all know that Andrew Luck's carrying you. That just
exactly. No talent. The GM's done a bad job. It's all Andrew Luck. So yeah, so someone's getting ready to beat me 73-9 in the playoffs for all the self-congratulatory stuff and doing with that team. But going down a little further, Nico Johnson played a little bit for the Chiefs this year. John Bostic supposedly has a lot of talent, but hasn't done it on the field yet. He did have 83 tackles. Arthur Brown's a very interesting guy because in the summertime, for the SOMIFA draft, you would look at Arthur Brown and you would say this guy's an inside linebacker. He's a second round NFL pick. He's on the Ravens. Here come the good ratings, right? And I bet he got gobbled up that way by some people. But they drafted C.J. Mosley in the first round. Darryl Smith's playing good football. Now, I don't know if Arthur Brown was injured because he's only listed as playing in 4 games this year. But he's a guy that you might want to, if you're going for the future, keep in the back of your head and draft him somewhere, even though you're not going to get anything out of him this year or next year. And, maybe...
Arthur Brown was placed on injured reserve after 4 games with a thigh injury. So
okay, that doesn't sound too bad, thigh injury. So maybe on pick 125 if you're in a total rebuild, or a little later you might get a guy like Darryl Smith is no spring chicken. You might get a guy who suddenly is a good complementary inside linebacker for Baltimore. But don't draft him too highly. But if you're going future, he's a guy to keep an eye on. And again, it's a weak ILB group. If I had to pick a guy, I said, all right, I want a guy, besides Alonzo, including Whitehead, besides Alonzo, I want a guy that I'm going to fast forward and is going to be on my team 4 years from now. Out of all these inside linebackers, it would be Arthur Brown.
Cool. I like Justin Campbell too. He's got a little bit of a pedigree, but
yes.
Most of these guys aren't really worth talking about.
No, they're late. They're late.
They're 10th round, and maybe you get lucky with one of them.
Exactly. The outside linebacker is an interesting group, I find, for this draft, and there's a fair amount of talent there. Actually, I would say there's good talent there. Not a lot of superstar talent, perhaps, but good talent, and a little bit of superstar talent. I mean, I'm going to read you. I'm just going to go down and read the names real quick because I think a lot of these guys can play in the NFL. And have proven it. Jamie Collins, C.O. Moore, Alec Ogletree, Denver's Brandon Marshall, Barcavius Mingo, Bjorn Werner, Jelani Jenkins, Alex Okafor, Danny Lansana. Each of those guys looks like they might be a pretty good player.
I really like the way Brandon Marshall played. I know he wasn't there for the Broncos playoff game, but he made some plays and he looked like he could be an impact player. And as a 5th round pick, you like to see that. Alec Ogletree's look good for the Rams. C.O. Moore also for the Raiders. Jamie Collins we talked about already. And Jelani Jenkins is another one of those guys who came out of nowhere. And just every time I would watch a Dolphins game on Game Rewind, man, that guy was everywhere. And not just because they were rolling up yards on him either, but the Dolphins for a good portion of the year had a decent defense, and
sure.
He was still the one making the plays.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you just said. From what I've read, Alec Ogletree struggled a lot in the first half of the season, and I guess he really came on strong. I mean, Derby had good things to say about him, and the Rams' defense, of course, came on strong in the second half, so that would make some sense, I suppose. Brandon Marshall, it's always interesting when you get a guy that was not a high draft pick. You're talking about a guy that was a 5th round pick in the NFL, and I agree, he looked excellent this year. I would say based upon the way he played this year that if you need an outside linebacker, take him, but don't worry about it. Now, it's interesting where all these guys are going to go. I mean, Jamie Collins, to me, has to be a top 17 pick at worst. And if you decided to take him in the top 10, I wouldn't argue with you, especially in this draft group. C.O. Moore will definitely be a top 25 guy because of the rating. I'm a little concerned about his rating next year. I know Derby gave him a 5.6. They got Khalil Mack. Moore missed a couple of games with injury. The Raiders still suck. So that would concern me slightly for his ability for next year's rating. But
I have to disagree a little bit with that because you're going to get, like Derby says, you're always going to have a couple 5s on those teams, even on the bad teams.
Sure.
And I think the Raiders, you can only pick, in the top 5 for so long and remain bad. At some point you got to turn it around. Look at the Detroit Lions. They were 0-16 several years ago, but with all those high picks, eventually you're going to get good. Eventually those players are going to get those good ratings, and C.O. Moore is one that I think is going to keep his rating. I think Khalil Mack's also an excellent player. They're not that far away from having an average to above average defense.
Yeah, sure. As teams like Cleveland, Detroit, and previously Arizona have proven, you can only draft in top 5 for 15, 20 years before you eventually turn it around.
Good point.
But I'm just saying he would concern me. I feel better than Alec Ogletree.
About his immediate rating next year, right?
and also long term. I don't think he's a bad player at all. But again, all right, who's rating am I most confident in 4 years from now? I like Alec Ogletree's rating probably better than Seal Moore's. I feel safer with Alec Ogletree's rating in 4 years than to do with Seal Moore's. I'm not saying Seal Moore is a bad pick. I just feel like long term, I'm slightly concerned that he's not going to be a perennial 5 or better. I certainly don't see him moving up to a 6. I could be wrong about that, but
No, I agree. He's not going to be a 6, but he can be I think he could be a perennial 5, and he has something that a lot of these outside linebackers are lacking, and that's that pass rush. You get that 5'6", 5'8", 5'7" guy. Man, I love to blitz those guys, and you do too.
Sure. I thought you were going to say he had the ability to hang out 20 yards behind the offensive formation and dance when his team was trying to win the first game of the year, which is what he and the other Oakland guy were doing on that Thursday night game against Kansas City when they were 0-11 and there was like 40 seconds left. Now, having said all that, I have him ranked as my number 2 OLB, but you got to realize a lot of times I do that when I know a guy is going to go. Like I have Seal Moore ranked as my number 2 OLB, but I don't think. But unless I had a really good team that was ready to win now and could use the rating, I don't think I would take him in the top 16 or 17, which I think he will go. I think he'll be like a 12 to 17 overall pick in SSFA, maybe higher in Spring Fever because they do the double counting on the defensive points.
Yeah.
But for me, I don't think he's a bad player. I'm just concerned that he's not as solid of a long-term player as you would like with a top 15, top 20 pick.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's go down the list.
I mean, especially if I tell myself, hey, maybe I can get Brandon Marshall at for number 40.
That's a good point. Or maybe I can get Jelani Jenkins at 50, or Bjorn Warner at 45.
Yeah, and
good to keep in mind.
So a lot of these guys are good. I want to mention. I know we're going to move on. I want to briefly mention two guys. Jarvis Jones, who last year I was telling people was definitely should have been a top 30 pick. He's done absolutely nothing. Pittsburgh fans say he stinks. So be a little careful with him. I'm not sure why he only played 7 games this year, if it was an injury or not. But I know even before. But I know even before that he was said to be playing not well and not even getting playing time, losing it to Arthur Moats and things like that. Barkevius Mingo, I have him on 2 of my teams. I drafted him around number 30, 31 in the fall drafts. He was drafted number 6 overall in the NFL. Does not look like he's going to be a pass rushing demon like they thought he was when they drafted him. But what I read, he played good. They put him in pass coverage a lot. Derby has him as projected as a 0.4. I think he's going to get a 4. I think he and Jabal Shield will both get 4s. He graded out very highly in the Saxier projections. He's a little undersized. I'm concerned about him, so you don't want to draft him too highly, but maybe around pick like 60, 65. If you need an OLB, might be a place to take a flyer on Mingo if there aren't any good other solid players that have slipped. And what do you think about that?
I would agree with that. I think those guys that go really high in the draft and are really young. Remember, he's still a very very young guy, born in 1990. He's going to be he's going to need to find the right coach, the right fit, and I think he could come on strong in the next 2-3 years. But they're being patient with him, and they're sharing time with him and Sheard. If you had that same position and he played all that time, maybe that accelerates his growth a little bit, or gives him that 4-10 card, 4-12 cut type of card if he wound up picking up all the sacks where they split between the 2 players. So, somebody's going to move on from the defense at some point and give him the opportunity.
Yeah, and he did play. He started 11 games, had 42 tackles, and he played pretty much the entire year with like a separated shoulder, or like he had a shoulder in a sling every game or something weird like that. You got to really Google that, and you'll read up on that if you're listening. I wouldn't take him too highly, around number 60, 65 if you're going for the future. And you might hit the jackpot, or you might say, well, okay, this guy never did it. But
another thing, too, he's going to, just like somebody like Rolando McClain, he's going to continue to get opportunities because he was such a high draft pick.
True.
He's not going to be like cut off of the team just because he's not performing as well as they think he should. And sometimes all you need is that second, third opportunity or that extra playing time to finally get over the top.
Sure. Let's go to corner ahead of safety, even though I have safety listed first because corner is more important. I think we all agree, right?
Yes.
Interesting corner group. You mentioned Nathan before. I mentioned Tim Bollier when we were doing the Derby preview review. Tim drafted a bunch of these defensive backs in Somifa, and he said that he and Nathan both liked them a lot. I don't know if that's true or not in terms of Nathan's end of it. Maybe I'm sure Nathan said it, but sometimes people are just being nice, But I do think that. But I agree. I think that these corners are very interesting, and I think there's a lot of depth here. There's a lot of interesting players. Now, again, maybe not as much as the outside linebackers, but once you get past those first three guys, look, you don't know what these guys are going to do. Is anyone there going to jump up and become a perennial 6 or a perennial 5? I think some of these guys have the ability to possibly do that. Are some of them going to be perennial 0s and be out of the league in 2 years? Yes, probably. But, you do the best you can. And if you need help at corner, I think there's some guys here that are going to be there, at pick 65 and beyond that might help you out for many years.
Yeah, I like obviously Desmond Trufant has a 5 this year in this set, and for next year he's projected again to get a 5. He'll obviously go in the top 10, top 12 at the latest. But Xavier Rhodes and Darius Slay, those guys went in the second and fourth rounds in Somifa and Afali. They're definitely going to go in the second round, if not maybe the late first. I could see Rhodes sneaking into the late first. And they've played well, and they deserve those projected 5s coming next year. And they look like they could be guys that will be 5 or 6 for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and I did my first SSFA mock draft about a week and a half ago, and the pickings got pretty slim in terms of looking for real solid first-round talent past about pick 17 or 18. And I think I had Xavier Rhodes going like pick 12. And again, I tend to look a little more future-oriented, but I do look at the teams and what they need and things like that. And I know he's a 0, and I know he didn't make the Pro Bowl, so he's not projected to be a 6. But corners tend to last a long time. It seems like a good corner. If you're a good corner, you're probably going to be there, maybe 9 to 12 years. I had this thing about positions that tend to last longer with good ratings. So I like Xavier Rhodes a lot. They got a good defensive coach now. The defense came up. I wouldn't be surprised if that Minnesota defense over the next year or two starts to become a really solid unit, and the quarterback is playing okay. I mean, I'm not predicting the Vikings are going to be a Super Bowl team, but they look like they're really heading in the right direction, and I think Rhodes is part of that. I mean, I personally, depending on your team and where you're going, you could make a case to take him number 12 overall. Which I know is crazy because he's not Darrelle Revis, but I don't think the draft is that strong. I just don't think the draft is that strong. And if you're building for the future, this is antithetical to traditional football teaching. But we're not dealing with real players, right? We're dealing with numbers and digits and the computer, right? So I really think if you're rebuilding, getting obviously you need a quarterback, but getting a corner is a good position if there's good players there, because you might take a guy and he might last 10, 12 years. Other positions, you take a good pass rushing outside linebacker, maybe in 4 years when your team is good, maybe he's starting to slow down a little bit. Those guys don't seem to last as long, or whatever. Or certainly running back or tight end, running back or tight end are two positions where that tends to happen a lot. So if you're rebuilding and you don't think you're going to be good till God knows when, take the best players available and try to emphasize the positions where they last the longest, and you'll be in better shape when it comes to year 3 or year 4, I think, than otherwise.
Even if you think about it from a physical standpoint, you're not on the defensive line or on the offensive line banging into people.
That's right.
Getting pounded around. You're hanging back in the tall grass and making your plays, and a lot of times you're able to make a play without making a huge hit. There are cornerbacks that deliver big hits, but they're not as frequent as some of the other positions on the defense, like linebacker or D line.
Yeah,
But
and
you can last a long time.
yeah, and it's a history where guys seem to last, where the really great players seem to last into at least their mid-30s. Think about Darrell Green and Dion, and I think Lem Barney played for a very long time. I could be wrong about that. Um, I don't know. That's what I think. And also, like I said, not the greatest draft in the world. I mean, I'll give you this. Sounds crazy. If I had a team that was awful, if I took over a team that somebody ran into the ground and they would look like they were going to go 0-16, okay, I would probably prefer to have Xavier Rhodes over Sheldon Richardson. If I had a team that had no talent at all, so I would trade down. If I was picking, fifth overall, I'm not going to take Rhodes fifth overall. I would trade down.
Right.
But I mean, if you have like an expansion team, you have no talent at all. You wait 4 years, until you're okay. Now, Sheldon's got 6 years on him. Like you said, there's all that grinding going on in up front. Maybe that's crazy, but I would actually probably prefer to trade down and take
That's
Rhodes.
a very interesting strategy. I like that. That's the kind of stuff that people are looking for here, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I know we're running a little late on time, but Darius Slay as a rookie was awful. Everything I read was that he totally sucked. I thought Tim did draft him in Somifa. I thought Tim made a big mistake drafting when he did. But then you fast forward 1 year, and this guy was playing very good football. He was clearly Detroit's number one corner. I saw him make very good plays on very good receivers. Sure, he gave up plays and got hit at times, but I think he is a solid 5 going forward, and I would take him 18 to 32 if I was going for the future and feel pretty good about it. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I could see him being a late first round pick. I like the way he's played. He's another one of those guys that is taking a big leap up the draft board between the fall and the spring drafts. Like you said, even going from the 4th round to the 1st round is a big jump for any player. But when he was taken in the 4th round in Somifa, we all kind of thought that was a little bit of a reach. But he's going to be a heck of a player.
Yeah, and then I think there's a drop-off after that. More questions on the rest of these guys, and the order is not so strict here. So I would tell you that of the rest of the guys I like best would be Jonathan Banks on the Buccaneers. I like Parrish Cox on San Fran. He was a free agent. I kind of like Demetrius.
Parrish Cox is a little bit older.
Yeah, he is.
I've been hanging around for a little bit.
He's a retread.
But
yeah, he's turning 28. He's 20. His birthday was 3 days ago. He's 28. Happy birthday, Parrish.
Yeah, happy birthday.
But also, I kind of like Demetrius McCray. Then a slight drop-off, maybe Dwayne Gratz. I liked Robert Alford a lot last year. I read good things about him, but he had a dreadful sophomore season and lost his job. So don't take him too highly based upon the second-round NFL draft. But if he starts slipping down, into the 110 range, and if you're going for the future, it's like late 4th round, early 5th round in SSFA. You'd be pretty happy to get him down there if you're going pure future. Again, I'm really talking future because that's my thing. I like the young players for the future. Bleedy Ray Wilson.
Skip over Micah Hyde. What happened to Micah Hyde?
Well, Micah Hyde ho. He returned 2 punts for touchdowns. That's got that going for him. He's got a great punt return call. This year, I believe, last year they said he was the nickel safety and that he did really well in that role. This is what's interesting to me is that in the comments, NFL Ed provides 2014 info, says here that Micah Hyde started 12 games, but Derby has him projected as a DB0.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there.
So
I think he's going to stick and keep his form as an extra DB. But,
I agree with that, especially with them having some success.
Started as a nickelback. Maybe that's what they're listing there, because a lot of times teams come out and they'll play 5 DBs to start the game.
Yeah, I'm gonna give me 1 second here, and I'm gonna give you some extra information on Micah Hyde.
And while you're looking that up, Bleedy Ray Wilson you were going to talk about. So Tim, that's another guy that Tim raves about, Tim Bollier, but Derby has him projected as a 0. I could see him getting a 4. I wouldn't be surprised by that.
But again, he's a young corner. He's starting. He was a 3rd-round guy. So some of these guys, for a year or two, they don't get a good rating, but they stick around. Maybe you start getting some 5s eventually.
Right.
Micah Hyde played 403 snaps as a safety for the Packers. To give you an idea, Morgan Burnett and Ha Ha Clinton Dix played about 960 snaps.
So he kind of got bumped out because of what Ha Ha Clint Dix when he came in and uh, took away some of his snaps as a nickel DB or as the starting. I'm sure he got some starts at strong safety or in the previous year he didn't get this year.
But I just clicked over to corner, and Pro Football Focus has him with 317 snaps at corner. So then you've got him with 717 snaps, which would be number 5 in the Packers secondary. So you got the 2 safeties I just mentioned. Tremont Williams has over 1,000 snaps at corner. Sam Shields had 834 snaps at corner. So Mika does look like he was the nickel back primarily for the Pack this year. And he wasn't he like a 2nd-round pick? No, 5th-round pick. Okay. So he might get the DB4. Maybe he's got, they said he played well last year. I don't know how well he played this year. Maybe he steps into the starting lineup at some point. I don't know. Certainly a very good punt returner. I would say you take him primarily as a punt returner, and you determine where you want to take that punt returner. But it's nice that he has the option of maybe one day being a starter. I would say maybe pick number 80, maybe.
Yeah, I could see him. I could see him slipping even further, maybe to the 4th round. But that return card, the special teams card, is going to give him a little bit of a bump. So people will grab him there just to fill some needs. So third round feels about right.
Well, I'm saying that they're going to take him 3rd round because of the special teams card.
Gotcha.
Doesn't he have a 3 touchdown this year?
I'd have to look.
I haven't had him on any of my teams. Let me do a quick Stratomatic. You make the call. So you don't even playing. You don't go back to the Street and Smith ads back in the 70s and 80s, do you?
No, but I have heard about them and seen them.
Yeah,
I know the whole Alcoa Fantastic Finishes and Street and Smith. You make the call kind of thing.
Okay, good. All right, Mika Hyde. He's a corner for this year, not even a DB for. No, he has a touchdown on 2 on the punt return. 9 is 15 yards. Otherwise, you get nothing. He's a decent kick returning with 2 is plus 70, 6 is plus 23. Decent. But next year he's got the 2 returns. He's listed as a PR2 though in Derby's projections. So I don't know if he's going to get saddled with all these extra lousy punt return stats from other guys in the team and whatever. But he did have 2 touchdowns and only 14 punt returns. So that's pretty nice. But I think because I don't know where he'll go now. Maybe you're right. Maybe 4th round is better. Maybe around pick 100.
Sounds good. But I think we'll go ahead of that. So are we done with the corners, or is there anybody else you want to talk about?
We're pretty much done. I mean, there's a lot of guys that were drafted like 3rd round NFL or whatever and played a lot this year. I mean, Dwayne Gratz had good write-ups coming into the year, but he's projected as a 0. But he plays for Jacksonville, opposite Demetrius from McCray. Logan Ryan was like a nickel for the Patriots, but was a 3rd round pick in the NFL. Darren Walls was in Pro Football Almanac's top 25 like unheralded sleepers. Those are guys who were drafted in the 3rd round or later, were under 25 years old, and who had not started more than 5 games or whatever. I can tell you as a Jet fan that he got torched regularly all season long, but Derby does have him projected as a 4.
David Emerson, 2nd round pick, Washington Redskins.
Yeah, I mean David
and projected as a 0, but
Jamar Taylor, Miami Dolphins 2nd round pick, possible 3rd corner. And then you still have guys after that. Melvin White's a 4 this year. Could be Carolina's nickel next year. Sterling Moore, a lot of Cowboy fans like him. Derby projects a 0, but he could be an extra defensive back 4. Heard decent things about Marcus Cooper as a rookie and Nickel Roby. I mean, most of these guys we're talking about now you're going to draft much later in the draft, 5th, 6th, 7th round. But, maybe you catch a break with one of these guys.
Yep.
So there's a lot of... What's interesting to me is that the passing game is so dominant in the NFL right now that in the draft that we're looking at, the 2013 NFL draft, a lot of defensive backs got drafted in the 2nd and 3rd round because guys are desperate to try and shut somebody down, which makes me wonder if a lot of these guys kind of suck and maybe they were overdrafted because teams are desperate for secondary help. So that's something maybe to think about in the coming years if you see a plethora of defensive backs getting drafted and maybe not getting rated too well.
Yeah, and you have your your token old guy in Jermaine McBride, which if you need a 4 later in the draft and he's still on the board, keep him in mind.
Actually, if you're an SSFA and need a 4 later in the draft, I would advise you to instant message Tom Cook and pick up Charles Tillman for a draft pick. That's what I would do. I'm just saying, you get veteran presence in the locker room. Peanut, you got a good nickname. Come on, you want Charles? Give me an 8. I'll take a number 8 for Charles Tillman. All right.
Sounds good.
Free advertising. See, if you do a podcast, you can broadcast the guys you're training.
Let's go on to the safeties because I'm fading here.
Okay.
So
yeah. So safety position.
3 5-rated safeties that will go in the top of the. Well, they'll go in the first round, I'm sure. Eric Reed, Tyrann Mathieu, and George Aloka. So
this is a really. Good. What was your question?
Who would you pick? You're sitting there at 15, and all 3 are available.
Oh, why are you putting me on the clock there? None of the above. I'm not taking.
Okay, you have to pick a safety. You have a contingency and a 0 at safety because that's your only pick. You only have 1 pick this draft.
I'm going to trade down.
Okay, you can't trade. It's a no-trade league.
I'm a new coach.
I'm going to pinpoint you. Who are you going to take? Who do you like between these 3 players?
I'm a new coach in Autumn Wind, and they won't let me trade. And I have a championship team.
Exactly.
A championship team that is a safety 0. I'm going to double team. I'm still not taking a safety. I'm still not taking one of these guys. All right. If I had to take one of these guys, first of all, I would feel like I was making a mistake. Okay? I don't think either one of them is worth the number 15 overall, but I would take Eric Reed.
Yeah. I like him too. That's who I would take first, and I think he will be the first safety off the board come Saturday. Honey Badger, if he wouldn't have been injured, I could see making a case for him. And then Aloka's a little bit of a later pick. He's a 5th round pick in the NFL, but he's played strong, and I like the way that defense is played even without Zimmer there. The Bengals I'm talking about. So I think that you'll see Reed go in the top 10, and then Mathieu will go somewhere in between 10 and 20, and Aloka might slip to the top of the 2nd round, late 1st.
I agree with you, yeah, but you know what? In some ways, I feel safer with George Aloka. Now, first of all, last show I erroneously reported that he was a UFA. No, on the part 1 with Derby, I erroneously reported George Aloka as a USFA. He was not. He's a 5th round pick, as Dennis just said. But he looks kind of safe to me. But I wouldn't want to take him before number 20, let's say. But then you get that issue of, if you get to number 20 and all these safeties are on the board, then you have the peer pressure issue. Am I really going to take a 5th round pick over Eric Reed and the Honey Badger, and now I'm going to be humiliated if this guy falls apart next year? Yeah, ideally you don't worry about that, because if you do a good job and you can coach, you won't be humiliated for long. And it's okay to take a chance to get humiliated, because then we'll all make fun of you when you're not around.
If you really like the guy, you got to take him, because he might not be there the next time your pick comes up.
Yeah, but it's a crazy group, because Eric Reed looks so strong and great as a rookie. Then Derby told you he didn't chart well this year. They've got a new coaching staff coming in. Maybe the Niners are getting ready to really slide off, which you'd like, I know. Then they got the Honey Badger, who I think we're having new lenient marijuana rules with the NFL Players Association. So I don't think you have to worry about his future and suspensions as much as you did last year. He's a real good-looking player, but he was hurt, and he has a history of injuries. Aloka is unheralded, but I think you made an excellent point that the new Cincy defensive coordinator did a very, very good job this year with that team, and they've done a great job of taking guys, UFAs and late draftees, and getting really good production out of them. And Aloka's the most recent example, probably. Jonathan Cyprien, you talk about tackles. This guy had 114 tackles and was a 2nd round pick. I like him a lot. He projects as only a 4, and the Jaguars might be bad for a while, and maybe they're going to fire Gus Bradley if they still suck in 2 years, and then you got to deal with the whole issue of a new regime. DJ Swearinger, I thought would get a rating. Derby's got him as a 4. He was a 2nd round pick. I kind of like him. So Cyprien, I like Cyprien a lot.
Now, let me talk a little bit about DJ Swearinger and why you have to be careful with Derby's ratings. Okay. We love Derby. He does a great job. But that's the type of player that you're going to say, oh, I would have taken him in the 3rd round, or I would have taken him in the 4th round. But Derby had him projected as a 0. And then when the ratings come out, he gets a 5 or a 4. You're like, oh, man, I should have taken him. Don't go by those things. You got if you like the player, and I like Swearinger. I like the way he looks. I like the way he
Me
hits.
too.
I could see him being the next type of Bernard Pollard type strong safety and bring home a bunch of fives in the next 10 years. So if you like him, take him. Um, don't just go by the projection because sometimes he misses and you miss by you only have three choices. Four choices: 0, 4, 5, and 6. So if you're off by one or off by two, he's still doing a great job on his projections. But if you like a player, don't be afraid to pull the trigger.
Yeah, I think you make an excellent point, comparing him maybe to Bernard Pollard in terms of this guy could be a 10-year five. Look at the stats: 16 games, 12 starts, 74 tackles, 2 interceptions. Obviously made a name for himself by running his mouth against Peyton Manning in the preseason. But this guy was a second-round NFL pick. He doesn't turn 24 until September. If you're building for the future, I'd be happy to take him number 50 overall, maybe. Kind of late second round, early third round SSFA, late second round spring fever. Do you feel that if you're going for the future and you need a safety, you feel that's too high for this guy?
No, I think that's actually a good spot for him, but I think he's going to go lower because of that projection, which is silly. Guys got to think for yourself. Don't just go by what people say.
Hey, let him slip. I'll be happy to gobble him up. Paul Mankiewicz, one of these other GMs will be happy to gobble him up. And then in 2 years, when your linebacker 4-3 who sucks is on the bench and Swearinger's got a 5, you'll be wondering what you did wrong. Now, there's other. I know you got to go, but there's other safeties here who look pretty safe. I'm going to deal with them first, and then the risks real quick. Some of the safe guys: J.J. Wilcox, T.J. McDonald. Those guys, I think, look like pretty good young players. McDonald charted out terribly, but Derby has him projected as a 5, so be careful there. He did have 105 tackles. He was a third-round pick. Some of the guys a little more risky. Matt Elam, yes, he was the number 32 pick in the draft. Yes, he was picked by the Baltimore Ravens. But, yes, they also put him on the bench because he wasn't playing very well, even though they had a ton of injuries. But now Jimmy Smith was a slow developer for the Ravens, so maybe they take guys where they see something and it takes a year or two for them to develop. So I don't know where Matt. Where do you take Matt Elam?
Yeah, almost everything I said about Swearinger, you could say the same thing about Elam. He just had a little bit of a hiccup this year, later in the year. So you like him, grab him.
Yeah, I think Swearinger's a safer pick. I feel like he's more destined to definitely start. But Elam, if you're going for the future, around pick 75 maybe might be a nice place to look at him. Kenny Vaccaro, I don't know what to tell you about Kenny Vaccaro. The guy had a lot of talent, had a lot of ability, had a great rookie year. They said he mostly played nickel safety as a rookie, and that this year they tried to play him more as a conventional safety, and he did very poorly in that role. He also had some injury issues coming out of college. Guy was the 15th pick in the draft. I mean, the Saints had a real good defense his rookie year. I think if they keep Rob Ryan, they're going to come back and have a pretty good defense. I don't think they have a lot of talent on defense, which is why they fell off, and I think they will address that a little bit. I don't know. I have no idea what number in the draft you'd take Kenny Vaccaro. Jeez.
Yeah, he's going to fall. But again, this is another spot where if you're not really contending and you're building for the future and he slips, keep an eye on him because that's the kind of guy that just needs, even not in a coordinator change. What if he just had a position coach change and the guy says, you know what, we're putting you back at slot corner, or we're going to put you at another spot where he's more comfortable and he starts to perform again. Or maybe they change the scheme. They keep him there at free safety, or strong safety, and they change the way that plays. You have a lot of different schemes that you can use. Rob Ryan's a smart guy. He'll figure it out. He'll look at tape and then they'll get together and they'll add some talent to that defense. Maybe he won't put so much pressure on himself if they bring in a free agent or draft another couple players where he doesn't have to do so much, and the ratings will come.
Yeah, I mean, would you be astonished if in a year or two Kenny Vaccaro starts establishing himself with perennial 6s? No, you wouldn't, because the guy was drafted number 15 overall. Having said that, maybe you look for him around pick number 70 or 75 for the future, maybe.
Yeah, and if he falls to the third round, I'm grabbing him. Just be forewarned. If he's available in the third round, he's not getting past Seattle. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, last thing to mention, a couple of guys got surprised, free safety and strong safety, 5 projections from Derby. That's undrafted Kansas City corner Ron Parker. who I believe started the year at corner and then slid to safety when Eric Berry was diagnosed with cancer. Derby has him projected as a 5. Unheralded guy was a 0 last year, so be careful there. Don't overdraft him, but Derby's pretty good, so keep that in mind. And Hussein Abdullah, who turns 30 in July, and I believe has always been a 0. Maybe he got a 4 in there somewhere. I don't know.
No, all zeros. All zeros for Abdullah. You say
Okay.
Abdullah, I say Abdullah. He's always been a 0.
Yeah, and he everything I read was that he had a really good year. I was reading it during the season, and I guess he charted well on Derby, projecting him as a 5. So be careful with those two guys because the track record is not the best. And I think they very well could get these projections, and I believe in Derby and his projections. But you don't want to draft one of those guys, let's say, in the second round, because next year you're going to have a good team and you need a safety. I think that's too high for them. I think, again, maybe around that pick 100 to 110 range. And Abdullah especially, I mean, you might get a 1 rating and then he disappears again. I mean, Parker's on a position change.
That's
Yeah,
the thing. This goes back to the buyer beware. Oh, man, I took him in the second round because Derby said he was going to get a 5 next year, and he's a 0. That can happen. He's
absolutely.
a 4. That can happen.
Yeah.
I watched the Chiefs a little bit, and I like the way Ron Parker's played, but he was on Seattle's practice squad / 8th DB type player for several years, and one year he got a 0, and then he left and went to KC. So I wouldn't be counting on more than 1 good rating next year. Barry's probably not going to come back and be the same player if he comes back at all. But they're going to draft somebody, and he's going to get moved out of that starting lineup. If it wouldn't be surprising, it might not happen. He might stick, but just don't overpay for those guys that you don't know for sure if they're going to get that 5.
Yeah, I didn't realize that Ron Parker was that old and had that history. He turns 28 in August himself. So Dennis is giving you the inside information there with him on the Seahawks practice squad. So, caveat emptor, which means buyer beware in case you're really, really bad at life. But yeah. So anyway, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I tend to think long term. I don't know. I always feel like if you have a contending team, you're probably not going to get those last couple of pieces in the draft that make the difference in securing a championship. But sometimes guys do. I know some guys will draft Kenny Stills because they love the long pass column. He had a pretty good year this year anyway. Ladarius Green, some guys will draft guys fairly highly because they're going for the year, even if the guy has a questionable future. But it's even worse. It's even worse, I think, if you think you're going to win next year, and now you're overdrafting a Ron Parker or Hussein Abdullah to get a projected 5. You can't even count on the 5. So you got to be careful and with that stuff. I like drafting future guys. I probably do it too much. But anyway, there we go.
Sounds good. So that takes us through the safeties, and I think we're going to skip the kick return or punt return. You guys are on your own for that. Do you have any closing thoughts you want to wind up with?
Yeah, do the coffin corner if you need to. Try to avoid have a guy with a block on his card or a long gain, and make some field goals, and you'll be all right.
Yeah, you're not going to believe this, but in my SOMIFA playoff game this year, I lost a barn burner 50-47 or something like that, where I gave up 2 punt return touchdowns to someone who had a 3 on their card. I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, but why didn't I coffin corner kick both times?
Because he would have returned it anyway. Because I hate that when you coffin corner. It's like a 1 in 6 shot, but they got to return it anyway. So you get like a 38. You get a 38-yard coffin corner to the 8-yard line. The guy's like, "Yeah, I'll return it," and then he gets like a 21-yard return. But you already played your SOMIFA playoff game now.
This is in last year's playoffs.
Okay. Who'd you lose to?
It was to Chicago, I believe.
Brad?
Yeah.
Matt Ryan?
Who?
Matt Ryan?
Yes, but the special team guy.
Well, I know Matt Ryan wasn't the special team guy. I know that. Devin Hester, maybe? He might have Devin Hester.
Let me open up my SOMIFA rosters.
Yeah, I just played him. I just played him in the fourth quarter and I won. And
Okay.
I think he had Devin Hester. Somebody had Devin Hester play recently.
It wasn't Hester though. It was one of these
Lester.
lower.
Leotis McKelvin.
Yeah, that's it. Leota's McKelvin. I got McKelvin. I got McKelvin big time.
Yeah.
So don't kick to McKelvin. That's the lesson from tonight. Don't kick to McKelvin. Out of bounds.
Yeah. Don't do it. But if you, yeah, then you're going to do a Sam Martin to get the old 10-yard shank.
Yeah, that's true.
Sam Martin's on one of my strat teams, and he was playing great all year. Now he's nefarious for the 10-yard shank after the
Yeah, but they
after
don't
the
target on the
after the strong pass defense by Anthony Hitchens.
nice.
Yeah.
Well, shall we wrap it up then?
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you want to, yeah. I think it's time to wrap it up. Wrap up the draft part. And after you disconnect, stay live. Stay with me for a minute. 'Cause I want to talk to you for a second, Dennis.
All right, guys. Thanks
But
for
to
joining us.
our yeah,
See
to
you
go ahead.
on the next episode of the Strat Fan Forum Football Show.
Adios, guys.